Morning Woodward Show here on the Woodward Sports Network. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, choosing us this morning. If you could do me a favor here, we're only 14 away from 100 likes. Let's set the tone for the network this morning. If you could hit that like button, I'd much appreciate it. Let's have the conversation. Where the Lions stack up against the top teams in the NFC. Coming off a tough loss, very tough loss to the Chicago Bears, a supremely inferior team, a team that they should have beat. But it is what it is. Divisional game, they drop one. They didn't play well. On to the next. I asked this question because I know after that game, everyone's like, they'll lose every game the rest of the season. They're not even in the same ballpark as these teams. And what I'll say on this topic is this, Sam. I think offensively, they're in that tier. Like, they could compete with these teams. I mean, they're a top 5 offense, despite what they looked like last week. I know they have to get back to what they were, but offensively, I think they can compete with these teams. Defensively, they cannot. They are not in the same ballpark as San Francisco defensively. They are not anywhere in the same ballpark as Dallas. They are not in the same ballpark, at least the pass rush for Philly. Secondary, actually, Philly has a terrible secondary this year. But the pass rush is where they're lacking. That's a big issue on this team. It's why I clamored for a trade at the deadline. Brad didn't do it. We'll see what happens this offseason. So if you're going both sides of the ball in totality, they're not there yet. I think they're about a year away from competing with those teams, which actually, to me, Sam, speaks kind of volumes about where this team is, because they're 9-4 despite all that. They're 9-4, and record-wise, they're kind of in the same ballpark as these teams, despite not having the talent defensively. So to me, that's a good thing. But at the same time, if you're going to ask me, Jeff, are they in the same neighborhood? I would say you're not exactly in the same neighborhood in terms of talent, but you're like across the street in like an apartment complex. And you're saving up money to move into that neighborhood.
Sure.
Like they're in this cute little apartment complex. You look out the window and you see these nice houses, and you're like, oh yeah, look at that. Look at Dak Prescott over there. Look at that defense. look at Brock Purdy. Look at that defense he's got. Look at Philly. Look at Jalen Hurts and what he has around him. That's kind of where you are. You're saving up money. It'll take one more off season to fully go in and buy one of those houses, to move into that suburb, to move into that neighborhood. They're not quite there yet. So I do think this off season. In the draft, in free agency, with players getting 1 year older, getting another year in the system, I do think they'll get there eventually, but right now they are not. Doesn't mean they can't compete. We'll find out. They go on the road to Dallas later in the year, but at this point, they are not there.
Sure.
They are not there. They're a tier below those teams, trending upwards.
Yep.
As of last game, it would seem like they're trending downwards, but I got to give them credit, Sam. You're 9-4 despite not having the same talent. That's got to mean something.
Yeah, they're clearly 4 at this point in the NFC right now. And I think if there's any position group where the Lions can compete and even are better than some of the other contending NFC teams it's in the backfield. I would say Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery is still the best backfield in the NFL, although the 49ers on their own have Christian McCaffrey and then whoever their backup is. I know Elijah Mitchell, but Christian McCaffrey is a superstar. But then when you look at the Lions backfield versus DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell, I would take Gibbs and Montgomery, and I would take Gibbs and Montgomery over Tony Pollard and company. So that's where they measure up. They measure up on the offensive line when healthy, although the Eagles have a damn good offensive line themselves, and the Cowboys' offensive line has had a resurgence. And at tight end, of course. I would still take Kittle over Laporta by a smidge, but I think Kittle clears Dallas Goedert, and I think Laporta clears Dallas Goedert, and Laporta clears Jake Ferguson. But as now, the Lions are clearly 4th. But here's what I will say. To me, it goes 49ers, spacebar, Cowboys, spacebar, Eagles.
The double spacebar.
Here's what I'll say. So and then Eagles, like spacebar, Lions. The Philadelphia Eagles, believe it or not, I know they've played a tough schedule. I know they've played a tough stretch. I know they've had a first-place schedule. They're coming off of a Super Bowl loss, and there's often a hangover to that. The Philadelphia Eagles, even though they have so much talent on that defense, have the 5th worst scoring defense in the NFL over the totality of a season, which is even worse than the Lions. I know the Eagles have played a tough schedule, but over the totality of a season, which is 12 to 13 weeks in, it's a big deal. And they're also 5th worst in the NFL in passing defense. And think about this. This is an Eagles defense that has Jalen Carter, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis. And in the secondary, you've got Darius Slay, James Bradbury, now Kevin Byard, Reed Blankenship. He's probably their weakness. Edmonds. And their defense is still struggling so much. And that's why I think they are vulnerable. Whereas the 49ers are number 1 in scoring defense and 3rd in scoring offense, and the Cowboys are number 1 in scoring offense and 4th in scoring defense. So that's why I would say the Niners and the Cowboys are a tier above even the Eagles, who are then a tier above the Lions. Do I think the Lions can win a playoff game? Absolutely, but I don't trust them to beat any of those teams in the playoffs. Although, if it happens, one of those opponents, either the Eagles or the Cowboys, would be at home, where I'd like their chances a little bit more, but still. The Lions are clearly 4, and for now, that's okay.
And the analogy I mentioned earlier about the neighborhood, and they're in the apartment complex, the 49ers are in a gated community.
For sure.
So they're in the gated community by themselves, smoking cigars, and then outside in the middle class neighborhood, or the middle to upper class neighborhood, you got Dallas and you got Philly, and then the Lions are just saving up money to get in that neighborhood. All right, the 49ers, we'll think about that later. That's about a year or 2 away. But the Lions, I think, JB, despite all the things we can criticize, the rebuild is on the right track. I think we can all agree with that, despite what we see.
Yeah, that's true. I think the rebuild is on the right track. I mean, we've got the guys there, the unique pieces that we need, but still at the same time, all these other teams, they just seem to be getting that much better, a little bit more better, just because they're finding these free agents that aren't, vibe guys that we want to have in the locker room all the time. Man. But hey, at some point in time, you have to take a chance and just get one of those aggressive guys that is actually going to put the quarterback on their ass. And I don't know if you can find that in the draft, because I feel like that's Brad Holmes' MO. Just, draft more guys and draft a younger talent, develop them a little bit more. But at a certain point, you need that veteran who's just a dog, in the words of our boy Lucas Klotz. So
a dog.
Just find those dogs out there and then add them to the team right now. And then I guarantee you, we will be up there contending with the Phillies, with the Dallas, with the 49ers. It just takes time.
So what you're saying is vibes are there.
Vibes are there, but our vibes winning championships is the real question. Our vibes winning championships, which it is not.
KG, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them credit to this point, because they have absolutely came through on all the predictions, the preseason predictions that people had for them, all the expectations. They've handled it pretty well. And like you said, offensively, they can compete with anybody. And also, I want to give some shout out to coaching, because Dan Campbell, to me, this year has shown a lot of improvement as a head coach. Last year, we had a lot of questions as to, what's he thinking on some of these 4th downs? Is he really going to be the guy to get us over the hump going forward?
Right.
And he's done a great job of not coaching us out of games this year and making relatively the right calls at the right times. But defensively, whether it's scheme, personnel, it's a little bit of both. They absolutely need help. I think they're also one offseason away from really putting this together, but that'll be on Brad Holmes to really bring it home with free agency and the draft. But more so to me, free agency, because like JB said, we need some dogs in here, some certified dogs. You don't want to just keep bringing young players in here, because there is a learning curve for most young players, unless you're like Michael Parsons or some freak of nature. But you just want to see them really build upon this in the offseason and keep this train going.
Gritville says lack of talent is just that, lack of talent to execute a winning scheme. You can't always make lemons into lemonade, not always. Brian Root says, just think we could have right now at CB 1 and 2 Bradbury and Johnson from Chicago right now. Effing sad. Max Mayer says, I like Sutton. I wish they put him number one wide receivers more than Jacobs. Jake says Sam Flannel's unaware that the tab or enter key exists. Speaking of Dan Campbell, you already mentioned him, KG. Let's go to break here. When we come back, we'll grade him. The Lions offense, defense, Aiden Hutchinson. We'll give all the grades, and then we'll get into our Pistons quickly. About a 10-minute discussion. It's going to be kind of a fun discussion.